Briefings Day on the 12th of August. Lovely to see you all. We have a couple of folks away, just acknowledging them. We have Councillor Mike Montgomery, Councillor Les Bennett, and we have Ian Kempson coming in and out where he can on Zoom, so you'll see him popping in and out. And let's start our meeting with our opening karakia. I'll start us off. Let's wait for Zoe to pop it up. Great. Tākina te marama kia tātou, tākina te aroha kia tātou, tākina te rangimarie kia tātou, ko Parongia me te kaua, ko Mangatauteri, ko Kakapuku nā maunga, ko Waikato, ko Waipa nā awa, tihe moriora. Right, and we're going to start with the Tākina Te Mana workshop. Great to see the Tākina team here. Looking forward to your kōrero and also meeting you. We have Nera coming in online. There he is. Morena Nera, I'll hand to you and welcome.
Morena, Madam Chair, tēnā tātou e ngā mema o te kaunihira. Tuatahi e tika ana kia tangi hia I ngā mate o te wā. E whakaaro nuiti ana ki te kaunihira o here taunga, ki te rārangatira toa Savili Nigel Bickle, kua riro I roto I te wikene ko hipa ake nei. Ko te rohe o Ngāti Kahungunu tērā, te araki mahinārangi, ko tūrongo, ko mahinārangi, ko raukawa, ko ia ngā whakapaparanga e tui nei tātou ki a tātou. Nō reira, moe mai rā I te rangatira, me mihi anō hoki ki ngā mate katoa o te wā, haere rā kūtau, oki atu. Secondly, I just want to extend my apologies for not being able to be there in person. I'm a bit under the weather and didn't want to make you all sick. A quick word of acknowledgement to a couple of my colleagues, Katie and William, in the governance team. There was a bit of a shuffle in the program to allow me to present today, and I just want to acknowledge my gratitude and thanks to them, and a shout out to the governance team. There's a lot of people that go into making us look good, and I just want to make sure they get appropriate acknowledgements. Ka toru kei te tuahine Dale Marie, tēnā koe I tō kauenga takitahi nei I te kaupapa I roto I ngā tau kua hori. Me pewhia au e kore e mihi ki a koe I te wawāhinga o tā tātou kaufau, a tā tātou wānanga I te ata tonu nei. In keeping with tradition, I understand we're going to open with a song, and I won't sing, but I do understand there's the crew in the room who are going to sing for me.
Lovely. Welcome, everyone. If you folks can turn your microphones on down there, that way our people online can hear you. Awesome. Thank you.
It's like a concert, isn't it?
Beautiful. Thank you so much. What a great way to start our workshop. I was just saying to Kirsty, how cool would it be to start every workshop off with a cool bit of music like that. Back to you, Nita.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For those of you with a keen eye, me and Mike, you would have noticed we lack a bit of male presence in the Waiata group. So Councillors Gordon, Taylor, you know, the crew, we're more than welcome to be accepting some men into our singing crew. I'm sure there's some good baritones in the back there.
Absolutely.
Members of council, before you today, as it comes up on the screen, is the Strategic Māori Partnerships Team Charter, which is called Tākina Te Mana. I've got some introductory words which will take about 20 minutes or so, and then some time for questions from you all. You'll probably notice there's a significant alignment with words in a poetic kind of esoteric way and also in a technical sense. Tākina is in our karakia that we just recited together. It's the name of the Strategic Māori Partnerships team. It's the name of this operational model that's starting to organically emerge within council. And it's the name of the document before you this morning. That's on purpose. Tākina means to lead, to begin, to recite a song, a karakia. So Tākina Te Mana, our charter, this first document in a series of 4 is about the leading of mana and what that role looks like in this process. Ngā Pau e Whā is a strategic response to how we can strengthen things within council and how we would use that strength as a position of response to te ao Māori. The 4 pau are distinct, but they form one connected system. Mana, that's what we're looking at this morning, asks us to understand authority, relationships, and accountability. Kawa establishes clear and consistent ways of working. Mātauranga will build knowledge and capability, and mahi will turn all of that into action and outcomes. The connection of the pau is important because mana without kawa can result in unclear or inconsistent practice. Kawa without mātauranga can become a process that lacks understanding. Mātauranga without mahi, I'm going to need money too, but mahi becomes learning without effect. And mahi without mana risks a lack of legitimacy or relationship. So they're all connected, but today we're focusing on the first pau, Tākina Te Mana. In your packs is a wonderful document, but I want to ask you to not look at that right now, and instead we're going to move to slide number 2. This is us. This is Waipa Council. It's a self-portrait, so I hope you can see yourselves reflected in this picture, the communities who elected you, and the organisation that you lead. It's all here in this picture. I'm going to use this picture to explain the purpose of Tākina Te Mana. The picture focuses on 2 key things, the mountain and the river. Those things are there because they relate to who we are in this part of the world. We're a river people. And because of that, we're concerned with the flow of things, where something comes from, how it moves, what it touches, and where it's going to. And one of the important ideas within Mātauranga Māori, a Māori worldview, is nothing exists in isolation or separate from anything else. So the mountain is not separate from the river. The river does not exist apart from the land. The eels in the river that you can see can't be separated from the health of the river, and people can't be separated from any of this. Everything exists through relationship. That helps us understand mana. Importantly, and I don't say this to disrespect ourselves, but mana does not begin with council. It doesn't begin with my team. It doesn't begin with this document. It's not created by anything that I can do in my work here for you. Mana precedes us, and it has its origins in Te Ao Wairua, in the spiritual realm, and it's manifested through the environment around us. The mountain, the river, the trees, the things of the natural world. And we draw our mana from those relationships, hence the phrase mana whenua. Council still holds considerable statutory authority and a democratic mandate. So there is a source of mana that operates within this district. But the purpose of this document is to help us understand and recognize different sources of authority and navigate the relationships between them as we act appropriately within this landscape. The maunga at the back of the picture represents the long view, the source, the strategic objectives, probably most of the things as governance, as elected members, that will apply to you. For today, as we're seeking the source of mana and we're seeking to understand mana, we could say that that mountain represents the Treaty of Waitangi, acts of Parliament, the democratic process itself. Understanding the source of things is important. And for us, the source represents the context that begins before any project, before any report, before any engagement process or decision. And we always have to seek the mountain, to seek the thing that begins before the part that we are engaging with, because the mountain will always matter to our treaty partners. They will always want to know what was there before us. You can take that and apply it in anything. If we're going to build a road, if we're putting in a new subdivision, a swimming pool, community facilities, anything, one of the first questions we always need to ask ourselves is, what is the mountain? What precedes us? From where do we draw our authority? What was there before the very thing that we're talking about now? Because these things don't just suddenly appear because we decided to write a report and present that to you. They're already a part of the landscape in which we operate. And so the maunga reminds us that our decisions don't begin with us. We enter the story and the relationships that were already present. So at a governance level, the maunga asks us what stands before us, what history and relationships are connected to this, where does the relevant authority come from? So that's the origins of this team charter of Tākina Te Mana. It establishes my team's mandate within council while recognizing that actually it's not mine alone. It's not Tākina's alone. It's not all of staff's alone. The mana of the relationship and all of this work touches every part of council. From the maunga, the mountain, flows the awa, the river. The river represents mana in motion and the movement of mana. It's the connection point between spiritual and natural world, places, generations. In the same way, Māori rights, interests, relationships, and obligations flow through every part of this organisation. They flow through strategy, through planning, through infrastructure, through property, policy, regulatory services, community relationships, and the decisions that come before you. The idea and tikanga of ki uta ki tai asks us to understand the catchment as one interconnected system. It reminds us that what happens at the source of the river shapes everything that flows, and that a decision made in one part will always have consequences for the whole. Whilst operationally we might be divided into now 5 groups, and then business units, we have budgets, strategies, policies, projects, and all the different frameworks, the river isn't. Tākina te mana, Māori partnership engagement, therefore, cannot be considered as a separate stream of work belonging just to one particular team in this organisation. The river flows through the whole organisation. Māori relationships, partnerships, learning, understanding belongs to all of council. And that's what Tākina Te Mana is seeking to establish greater clarity around, the flow, how the mana and the mandate touches every part of council. Remember, the maunga is the source, not the document. Within the river, you'll see tuna. Our part of the world where I come from, Dale, Marie and Steph, it's called Te Rohe o Te Tuna. They also taste very good, but for the purposes of this presentation, it's where we come from. And tuna live within the flow of the river, within the flow of mana. They read the currents, respond to changing conditions, navigate obstacles. Sometimes they're swimming with the current, sometimes they're going against the current. Whatever the river has to offer, the tuna must find the pathway through unfamiliar conditions. The tuna in this picture represent my team and how we can help everybody navigate the flow of council. The tuna also represents the education that we want to implement with everybody so that we can all understand and navigate the flow of the river. Not everything important to council decision can be contained in a technical report. Some knowledge will be held through whakapapa, through lived experience, through tikanga, through generations of relationship. Tākina Te Mana is here to help us recognise that when this knowledge is required, a different approach to that system of knowledge and that understanding needs to be enacted. And as we've just seen from the waiata and our crew, and as we already know and are experiencing, the staff in this organisation are incredibly capable. They have the will and the want and the desire to be able to do this. Our role is not to take away that responsibility from you as elected members. It's to help balance that responsibility well so that everyone can navigate the river. No one owns the river. No one can control the flow of the river. The best we can do is navigate it like the eels in the river. On the sides, sorry, I'm pointing at my screen as if you can all see me. On the sides of the river, you can see a design called Niho Taniwha. Niho Taniwha represents strength, protection, discipline, guardianship. It's a pattern significant and unique to Painui. They're there to protect the integrity of the flow. So organisationally, that might be good process, clear expectations, appropriate boundaries. I think the executive leadership team under Steph's direction are represented in the Niho Taniwha. You too, as councillors, are represented in the Niho Taniwha. It reminds us that our statutory obligations, settlement commitments and relationships shouldn't be treated as optional considerations or added at the end of a process. They are a part of the boundaries within which the flow, the mana, touches every part of council that comes from the source, which is the mountain. We, tākina, don't speak for mana whenua, iwi or hapu. We don't own every relationship with them, nor do we own every Māori outcome in this organisation. We're here to help navigate the flow so we can all together achieve the right outcomes. To the side there, you'll see some trees and a bit of wider landscape. The object of the forest in this self-portrait is we're not trying to grow one strong tree called the Strategic Māori Partnerships Team. The object here is to cultivate a healthy forest across all of council. The strength of the forest doesn't come from one tree possessing all the knowledge. It comes from a relationship between them within the life system of the ngahire. So that's why education and capability building are going to be incredibly important. And the Māori concept of ako, of learning, is about a reciprocal relationship of teaching and learning. Not everyone needs to become an expert in te ao Māori or tikanga Māori. Education is not intended to replace knowledge held by mana whenua. It helps us understand the relationship of teaching and learning. Success is not one increasingly busy and overexhausted team or group of staff. Success is all of us across the organisation being able to clearly identify Māori rights, interests, relationships, obligations, and to do all of that early so we can know how to respond in the best possible way for you, for our team, and for the well-being of our community. Ultimately, as you'll see in the picture, in our self-portrait, the river runs off the page. And there are no dams in this river. And that's an important metaphor. There's lots of dams in the Waikato River, but there are no dams in this river. And we don't want our own internal processes to become a dam. What enters our organisation flows through relationships, mātauranga, legal obligations, strategic advice, and all of that flows through better decisions, stronger relationships, and outcomes that uphold the mana of iwi, hapu, and the mana of council. And that's ultimately where the quality of everything we're trying to experience outside of the organisation will impact the lives and the future of those of us that work inside the organisation. So tākina, our team, tākina te mana, this charter, this document, helps us recognise the source as the maunga, navigate the flow as the awa, protect the integrity, the niho taniwha, so that we can grow an entire organisation that are experts in this kaupapa and in this way of being, the ngahere, the forest. That's the purpose of tākina te mana. It gives the riverbed its shape, clarifies mandate, establishes what the wider organisation can expect from our team and what responsibilities remain with others. If we move to slide number 3, and don't worry, this is the last slide. The 3 statements on this slide express what tākina te mana means at a council-wide level. They're not 3 separate ambitions, they form one connected movement. In Diligent, you will see a document that lists and categorises the substantial body of statutory, settlement and agreement-based responsibilities and legal obligations that exist between council and Māori. These obligations extend across almost every major council function. In your papers, the tool is there to help support understanding, but a bit of a buyer beware disclaimer. I am no lawyer, but don't worry, our actual one did overlook this list. What I can say with incredible confidence is this list won't get any shorter. But I actually expect that it's probably a lot longer. We just haven't discovered all of these things yet. The list of legal obligations can't be treated as optional relationship activities, solely responsible and assigned to my team. The law provides the framework and a minimum standard. So tākina te mana, our team is here to help all of council identify these issues, understand and navigate the obligations as we all hold on to the responsibilities. And there are some key risks here, and we need to get across a number of these matters faster, more effectively, and with greater depth and knowledge. Education for everyone. If Māori partnership and engagement is a whole of council responsibility, then education and capability must also extend across the whole organisation. We don't all got to become experts, but everyone needs to understand the local context. That will help us to move faster and get better at this. Education, we also know, will give confidence to our people to carry these responsibilities well. We recently undertook a Te Ao Māori capability survey across all of our staff. And the results of that survey and the data that we're now able to analyse tell us that the awareness of staff to Te Ao Māori is high. The confidence and capability is a little low. However, and this is the most encouraging part, the desire and the want for practical resources that can help staff complete their mahi is incredibly high. After I drafted my PowerPoint, I wanted to change this last one to lifting Waipa to be a champion treaty partner. This is the outcome towards which everything is leading us to being a good treaty partner. One of the first workshops that our team wants to run with all of council is an internal reflection and an internal review on how are we doing as a treaty partner? How do we think we're measuring up ourselves? This demonstrates the quality of our relationships, the questions we ask, the voices in our processes, and the decisions that follow. Being a good treaty partner doesn't mean that we're always going to agree with iwi. Partnership also demonstrates how we maintain relationships through difference. But the leadership that we're seeking for our community is to grow and move forward in a way that is good for all of Waipa. So I know that's a lot in a short period of time. Tākina te mana is the first pou because clarity of purpose and mandate needs to come first. We need to understand the source of the mana, understand the mandate, and understand the responsibilities we all carry. From there, kawa will establish how we work. Mātauranga will build our knowledge and capability. And mahi will translate it all into action. Together, this emerging kaupapa and process called ngā pou e whā will provide a pathway for council that's more capable, more consistent, and better able to uphold the relationships entrusted to us. Not seeking any direct decisions from council on this kaupapa at this point. This is more an awareness for you all because this kaupapa and everything that it offers and represents manifests through actually almost every decision you will make. So rather than bring this with a view in full council to a specific decision, this morning we're bringing this before elected members to bring awareness for you, to offer advice and to have this workshop so we can start to understand and to delve a little deeper into mātauranga Māori and te ao Māori. So ultimately, we can all mahia te mahi, as Princess Te Puia said, which is do the work. Tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou. And sorry, it's a little weird doing this on TV.
Not at all. Kia ora, Nera. That was great. Thank you very much. Questions, comments for Nera on his presentation? Claire, I'll start with you.
Yeah, thanks, Netta. It's really great to have you explain it so well. I think you've got a real talent for, getting the deeper meaning of things. And so I just wanted to refer to that lovely self-portrait. Yeah. So, and this is just something personal for me. Okay. I've got a question as to, in that landscape, why are there no people? Because I find this rather strange myself, because when we are working for our communities, as elected members and things like that, it really is the people that I suppose are the biggest motivator for me and the biggest headache as well. And so would you like to just explain why it's not usual to see people in art forms that Māori have, and whether or not it would be appropriate to have them in that particular one?
It entirely could be. The picture there, I did myself with the help of some AI technology, so it only produced what I asked it to. For me, the picture was seeking to explain where we draw mana from as people. And we don't draw it from ourselves, we draw it from the environment, the natural environment. So that's the relationship there. Ultimately, the point you raise is absolutely correct. And of course, there is the whakatauki, he ha te mea nui o te ao, he tangata, he tangata, he tangata.
Yeah.
What is the most important thing? The people, the people, the people. So yes, I take your feedback and acknowledge that. More than happy to go away and see what me and Copilot can then come up with in a second iteration.
Good luck to you. Every time I try the second time to do some
gets
art,
worse.
it just throws it out. It's just hopeless. But I'm really impressed with your efforts.
Te Marie.
Tēnā koe Nera, e mihi ana kia koe e te rangatira mo tēnei kōrero, kouwhau i tēnei rā. I'm just going to respond to Claire St. Pierre. And I know I was sort of looking over here at Steph to try and find it, but I had to do a quick look into Google to get this out because I'm not real like Nera. We could turn that picture around, and because for us, I know whatu ngarongaro te tangata toi tui te whenua. The whenua is always here, the river is always here, but like us, we'll change out on this table. So I quite like that there's no humans in that picture, because when there's no humans, there's usually no pollution either. So yeah, koina tēnā.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, we could have a good conversation about that. I mean, I'm not challenging what Nera's said to us, but for me personally, I actually find a source of mana is people. Like when I think of the example of some people before me and things like that. And like a lot of the whakatauki actually is about people, what people did, so it's not about what the words they said, but often about their actions. And like, as an elected member, I'm really conscious of I suppose, what others have done before us, for our communities. Yeah. But I mean, I think it'd be a good conversation to carry on.
Good discussion. Mike.
Thanks through the chair. Kia ora Nera for that presentation and the governance team and those that helped put it together also. And I just pick up on the point of the interrelationship between the po, and they were focused on mana today, takinga te mana, that they're all interrelated. And I guess fundamentally it's about when we're looking at strategy, we're looking at doing things as an organisation, and some really powerful points here to consider. So I'd just like to acknowledge the mahi that has been done. I can totally see how it actually works in, particularly to an environment in a place like Waikato and Waipa. So just looking forward to working with this model into the future. And also actually just that it's like you say, it's not about one person or part of the organisation. And that's what I like, that tree analogy, that it's actually it's the forest working together.
Thanks, Mike. Ian, and then Pip.
Yeah, awesome presentation. Thanks, Nira. I really enjoyed that. Found that very insightful. Question, and I might be skipping forward to one of the other because I think when I looked at that document, there's a lot of good stuff about internal capability and so on and so forth, and you touched on that. I think when we look, and maybe it sits in the Mahi Po, I think there's this should have external outcomes associated with it as well as internal ones, I think. And so that's the only flag I looked at and thought, solid piece of work. The only question mark I had in my mind was that gives us a good feel for what it's going to mean for us, but what about outside the council walls of the organization, if you will, for the wider population, what would we consider success of this to look like? Be it for the entirety of our ratepayer base, basically. So yeah, except that, particularly given your explanation right now, I don't know that lives in this document, but just as a heads up as we go forward, that was the only bit I looked at and thought, yeah, maybe we could do, because I'm sure they're there, so it's worth calling out and identifying and flagging them, because that gives us another measure of success.
I might help. Nita, do you want me to, is it okay if I jump in there? Ian, the great yellow-red character that you are, you're off down the track 10 k's ahead as you normally are, which is great. It's what we love about you. I just want to acknowledge Nita, tēnā koe, e te rangatira. Thank you for this piece of work, for your team. Marama's here, Erin is not in the room. He may well be somewhere else with a fish in his hand, but and I want to also acknowledge the Waiata group, the Waiata Ropu, only not so long in practice, but long enough to sound that good. So thank you very much. And thanks to everyone who contributed to this. So this piece of work we've brought to you so that you understand what Nita's role is as kaihotu, what the Tākina team's role is in the organisation, and how it will impact all, both internally and externally in terms of who we need to be as an organisation, but what does that deliver externally? And so there are a couple of other pieces that will come. Nita's very rightly staging this for you, so we don't drown you in at the outset. But this is the piece to say, this is who the Tākina team is. This is the way that Nita has led the thinking, the mātauranga, with his knowledge about how does this frame up for us as an organisation. The whole objective is, as we've always talked about it, is to grow our capacity and capability and confidence to work in Te Ao Māori and be a good treaty partner. So everything that Nita has just talked about, Ian, is building a pathway so that our outcomes are stronger and better and our relationships are enduring, and that the community can also understand what council is doing as a good treaty partner and what is the value of that. Now, a piece that I've asked Nita to do is to build a strategic Māori partnership framework for the organisation. The first part of that is that Nita's got somebody asking iwi how they find it to work with us. What's going well, what's not going well, exactly like we're going to do with these civil contractors we've just talked about this morning with procurement, to tap into the people who work with us and say, how is that experience for you? And understanding that context helps build us with our internal organisational framework to say, what is it that we need to work on? And this is an enduring partnership. We don't expect to fix everything in the first year. We know we need to have a journey of building our capacity and capability. Now, why this is important though, right now, is because this is a new journey for the council. As you consider this in the long-term plan, what Nita has outlined to you is that there's over 110 pieces of statute and responsibility that we have for working as a good partner. Now, the question becomes, how well are we doing that as an organisation? Are we focused on that? Are we being compliant and meeting our obligations, let alone just being a good partner in the community? And are we resourcing that effectively to be able to get those outcomes? And that's a question through the levels of service that you will be asked to think about. And so we needed to, as part of NEDA's program of work, getting this to you in a timely way is also really important. But it is also reflecting the first sort of what we call a potama, is the steps of knowledge as you build towards higher heavens. We realise we're at the beginning of that potama as in this journey, but we wanted to come and share with you that this is the reason, this is what's going on, this is how it's framed and what value it will bring to the organisation and therefore to our community. So I hope, Neda, I haven't under or misrepresented what we're trying to do with this. But again, I just want to mihi to you because I think it's been explained in a very clear way and in a very helpful way. And I think that self-portrait's fantastic. It's a beautiful self-portrait. So well done. Thank you.
Thanks, Steph. Pip.
Thank you. I was very mindful yesterday morning. I was at the Karakia and Pōwhiri for the opening of the new facility at Matasejana Drive, and afterwards I sort of met with Harry, who led the ceremony, and had an interesting discussion with him. I whakapapa to my property in the Bay of Islands. I feel very much the connection between me and the land. And we live at the end of a road which is named after my parents. But the reality is that that's about 1% of New Zealand. Or I don't know, maybe it's 10%. But the sort of, the other 90% of the people who don't connect, and how, and when you understand the fact that you do have that long lineage and there's that connection. But the reality is that most of our property owners sort of see this as a financial asset that's a tradable commodity. And how do we then start connecting this stuff to the people who go, is it really that relevant?
Sorry, I was trying to find my mouse. That's a good question, and I think again, thinking back to the picture in the maunga and what precedes us, if we can invite all of the district on that journey, they'll start to have an understanding of where they fit in the narrative of the district. That should not preclude business owners, because iwi are business owners too, who have interest in financial outcomes for the good of the community and the people as well. The outcomes that we seek, I think, are largely aligned. The invitation is to consider a different approach to how we might get to that point. But largely, I think the way in which we can get there is through bringing everyone on this journey. And again, as Councillor Campson said as well, we will ultimately get to a point where the external impacts and the external outcomes are going to be really important for this kaupapa as well, because the strength of this work perhaps will be reflected in how does the community and the district come along on the journey. I mean, that's a hard task, but I'm up for it.
Thanks, Neda. Any further questions? Shane.
Nera, thank you very much. Fantastic piece of artwork you've produced here. I wouldn't mind a copy of that, actually. It's really good and it very meaningful when it tells the story in a really clever way. I'm just trying to reflect in terms of your process, Nera. We're going now through the long-term plan where we basically have to start thinking about actions and delivery and outcomes, which is the mahi. Will you be in a position to soon paint the picture of what that mahi looks like in terms of our partners out there? You know, what are they wanting? What's their aspirations? How as an anchor institute, how can we be assisting them? Will you be in a position to paint that picture? Because, you know, this is a tight process and we need to have that information as soon as possible so we can fit it into our planning.
I think there's the short answer to that is yes. Yes, in terms of for the purposes of the LTP and those obligations, I am confident that we'll be able to have the required information before council. The process of the 4PO is seeking to kind of meet that, and we can skip ahead if we need to. The longer aspiration of the process is about cultural change and education within the organisation, which means the process will inevitably become circular as opposed to linear, because we'll be constantly upskilling our staff, our team, our people around these kaupapa. But in terms of the immediate deadlines, yeah, we'll be ready.
Good question, Shane. Thank you. Any further questions or comments? No, Nera, thank you for that presentation. That was awesome. Understanding mana, kawa, maturanga and mahi as those 4 pillars, I think is so important. I'm happy to leave you with the final word on this. So hand to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Council, for receiving the presentation today and for the feedback and the comments we've had. Always available to be able to wānanga the kaupapa and the understanding a little more. It remains a significant privilege to be able to lead this work within all of our organisation. As I mentioned earlier in the presentation, the results from the all staff survey are incredibly encouraging, and we're really excited to be able to embark on this journey. So thank you to my colleagues, to our CE Steph and the exec team, and all who have contributed to the development of Tākina Te Mana. Genuinely all whānau kaupapa that's my privilege to be able to bring before you this morning. Kia ora tātou.
Kia ora, Nera. Thank you. And thank you to the Tākina team and to the Waiata group as well. That was a beautiful way to start our day. So thank you for that.
Kia ora, Nera. Get well.
Yes, absolutely.
Kia ora, team. Thanks so
Thank
much
you.
for coming in and supporting the kaupapa. Thank you. Kia ora, Amanda.
Right, that brings us to our public transport item. We have Eric here, and also want to welcome Catherine and Luke as well, that are presenting with him. Nice to see you. Welcome. I'll hand to you, Eric, to kick us off when you're.
So thank you, Madam Chair and elected members. It's my pleasure to introduce you to the following. Catherine Simpson. Catherine is a team leader for transport planning at the Waikato Regional Council. The Waikato Regional Council is the lead agency for public transport in the Waikato region. And Luke Elliott, who's a principal transport planner at Mott MacDonald in Auckland. And Mott MacDonald is a global employee-owned engineering, transport and development agency. So the structure of this workshop, I'll provide a quick recap of the previous workshop that we held on this topic. Luke will go over the key elements of his report, explain the 4 shortlisted options, and go a bit further in detailing the recommended options and why it was chosen. Catherine will discuss our next steps. And then we propose to give elected members the opportunity for any questions and discussion, but I ask that we hold questions until after our presentation. Thank you. And then I see we're running a little bit early, but yeah, if we, do we still want to finish at the same time, Chair, or?
Yeah, happy if we, see where we land,
Okay, yeah,
If there's
yeah.
plenty of questions, we can go right to the end time.
Okay.
Happy to do that.
Yeah. So now I propose so this part of the workshop, we concluded at 12 o'clock sharp, and then Brian Hudson will then present his memo that talks more about the interagency governance of as it relates to public transport and the LTP, with a conclusion at 12:15.
Excellent, thank you.
Thanks. So a quick recap of the workshop we had on the 5th of May. And before I start, I just want to acknowledge that there's very keen interest from the community on our bus services and how the service can grow. I also want to acknowledge the alternative response that was tabled by Roger Gordon last week. So Cambridge is mainly serviced by bus 20 from Leamington to Hamilton. This service had some major improvements to the fleet and schedule in 2024. And since then, we've enjoyed very strong support and growth to the service. So we now have some 370 trips between Cambridge and Hamilton every weekday, and some 30 trips within Cambridge each weekday. I'll now hand over to Luke, and he'll go over his report. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. And good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. So we'll recap some of these slides about the contents of the report. This first one is showing the 4 shortlisted options that we considered. So in the previous report, we had a longer list of 8 options, which we narrowed down to these 4. And then within each of the 4, there were some sub-options that were considered. But what you're seeing here is the kind of recommendation of each of the sub-options. So the first one was a local bus service for Cambridge. So that was a new service entirely within Cambridge. So the existing Route 20, what we've called the regional service, would have remained as is, supported by a local bus service to improve coverage and also provide connections to that regional service. The second option was what we called a regional branch. So the existing service continuing as kind of one southern branch, and then a new northern branch being introduced to both expand local coverage and provide for trips from the northern suburbs to the town centre and other destinations like the velodrome, but also providing for that onward service to Hamilton. The third being an on-demand service, and the type of on-demand service that we proposed was what's called set destination. So rather than being a kind of anywhere to anywhere, almost like a taxi or Uber, it was kind of picking you up near your house, and then you would be able to select from a range of preset destinations, things like the velodrome, town centre, the Leamington shops, potentially the school, and so on. And then we also considered a kind of mix of service types. So running kind of fixed route service at peak times, and then an on-demand service during the middle of the day and the evening. I'll just touch a bit on demand a little here. The name kind of makes you think that, oh, you know, this thing is going to turn up straight away. But in terms of the type of on-demand services that are being operated around New Zealand and also overseas, often there is a bit of a wait time. So you order the service, and then the wait is can be something like 15 to 30 minutes before it actually turns up to pick you up. So that name can be a little bit deceptive. You can see how the different options compare, and I'm not going to read each of these different criteria off, but we were considering things like total coverage, the number of new boardings that the service would get, the overall operating cost, and what that translated to in terms of a passenger cost. So green being, this is very high level, but green on this slide being good, orange being kind of medium, and then pink being kind of lower in comparison to the other options. And so you can see the option with the most green there is the regional branch service, which leads me to the next slide, of that being the recommended option. So what we were recommending was the existing service to Leamington remaining as the southern branch, with the potential for that to be extended in the future to the new growth areas in the kind of southwest. And then a new northern branch, primarily along kind of Norfolk Drive, Tulip, down past the likes of Carter's Crescent into the town centre. So that means that both branches would serve the town centre, which is where most of the existing patronage on Route 20 comes from, and then continue on to Hamilton. So if you were in Hamilton, you'd know that you could get either branch, and that would get you to the town centre. And then if you were on the kind of more northerly or southerly part, then you would have to be looking for either the N, which we're proposing as how you would sign the northern branch, or the L for Leamington. So each of those would run at least hourly, which is similar to what Leamington has today. So the kind of common section from the town centre to Hamilton would be every 30 minutes. And then slightly more frequent at peak times, so as to not reduce the level of peak service that Leamington currently has. So this concept is kind of building on the success of the existing route and supporting that kind of Cambridge to Hamilton journey, which makes up most of the existing patronage, but also allowing for new journeys just within Cambridge from those northern suburbs to the town centre, for example. Another part of the reason why this was the recommended option is that it would be relatively easy to implement this as a variation to the existing bus contract, as opposed to needing to kind of contract an entirely new service. It also doesn't preclude the potential for a local bus service entirely within Cambridge to be operated in the future. And I think it kind of builds towards that. The new bus stop infrastructure that you would need to support this sort of service could also be used by a local service in the future. So in determining the route for that service, we considered a range of different options. And the kind of primary consideration was, should it go on Victoria Street versus the route that I described of kind of Norfolk, Tulip. And so the proposed route, which is the kind of dark red here, had kind of double the catchment of that Victoria Street alternative, which is part of the reason that we recommended it. So essentially it improves coverage by around 50% compared to what the existing service provides for. Which is not to say that Victoria Street couldn't be used by a local service in future. I think it would actually make a good kind of local service alignment. But in terms of the kind of short to medium term of what is kind of most effective right now, that more outer route is our recommendation. So for that route, we think you need around roughly 10 new bus stop pairs. And that would include things like upgrades to the footpath, the curb crossings, the crossing of the road itself, possibly a shelter in the kind of inbound direction. So it's not just, also that cost, which is around 1.5 million, is not just benefiting the bus passengers, also benefiting active modes, people kind of walking around the neighbourhood. That cost is also the kind of total cost, and there would be a cost sharing element from NZTA if the funding was approved. And I should also say that kind of working with Catherine, Waikato Regional council's operational staff kind of drove the proposed route and assessed it as suitable for buses. And we did a little bit of look of where bus stops could be, but that would need to be looked at in more detail and consultation with the community on exact stop locations if the funding application was successful and you did go down this route. This slide is kind of summarizing some of the expected outcomes from the proposed service. So moving from kind of 36 trips between Cambridge and Hamilton to 60 on weekdays, going from the existing roughly 500 boardings per weekday to around 800 by 2037. That date being kind of 10 years from when the service might be introduced. In 2026 dollars, roughly $750,000 annual operating cost above what operates today. And that's the kind of overall cost before we think about things like fare revenue, NZTA share, and so on. And as I mentioned, kind of 1.5 million for bus stop infrastructure at a high level. And that could be refined down as you think in more detail about which stops need a shelter, what sort of crossings and so on are required. We also considered the school assist service. So within Waikato region, there aren't any dedicated school buses operated by the regional council. There are some operated by the Ministry of Education. But in terms of urban services, what's operated called school assist, which is generally the existing route, maybe with a slight variation. And that's what we're recommending here. So this 20S service, the kind of purple line, would run between the two branches, and that would get people from Leamington to North Cambridge. So that would primarily be targeted towards students, but it would also be open for other passengers. So if someone from Leamington is working in the kind of industrial area near Carter's Crescent, for example, they could catch this service. This would replace what happens at the moment, which is that some trips from Leamington go up to the high school or near the high school before they continue on the way to Hamilton. So this would be providing that same sort of connection. This is just a concept at this stage, and there is more engagement that would be required with the schools, with the operator and the ministry on this topic. But I think it's useful to start thinking about these sort of things at this point. In terms of implementation, we kind of identified 3 potential phases. The first one being to implement the branch service itself. The second one being to think about that school assist service. So depending on when funding was approved, it might be that you could implement the new branch kind of in the second half of a year and then want to wait until the following year to introduce the school assist service with that new school year, for example. And then in the third phase, we were thinking about extensions to the Leamington service to cover off some of that growth in the southwest. But the exact route and timing of that you'd want to consider with the community in more detail. So that's kind of implementation of the immediate recommendations, and then kind of longer term, as I was saying, it may be that you want to operate a local bus service entirely within the town, and that might make use of some of the new bus stop infrastructure as well. And then I know that you're considering as part of Cambridge Connections a potential new river crossing, and I think that would open up kind of new possibilities for bus service as well. But that's possibly beyond the time frame, out to 2037 that this report was covering, so we didn't look at that in much detail. I'll pass over to Catherine now for this final slide about kind of next steps.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Kia ora, good morning, everyone. What I thought would be useful for me to talk to today is really, I know the next steps are really important, but I think it's also would be helpful just to set some wider scene setting, I guess, on where this service sits in our public transport plans. I guess what both Luke and Eric have already alluded to is the fact that this project in itself has been building on a foundation of work that has been done, to date. We have the Metro Spatial Plan, which really drives
connection through the public transport in the metro spatial area. We've completed a PT Pathways project maybe 18 months ago now, which identified the staging and sequencing of PT enhancements in the metro spatial plan area over the next 10 years. And that PT Pathways work itself also identified that the number 20 Cambridge service, should have a split branch service, and this was kind of testing that and going into a bit more detail of how that would actually work in practice. So it's, as we've kind of flagged, this is a incremental but a scalable step in public transport, both for Waipa District. This one's specific to Cambridge, but as with all our public transport planning and PT Pathways, we do things in steps. It's a bit more easier sometimes. We also have our regional public transport plan, which has flagged for some time aspirational levels for public transport enhancements between Hamilton and Cambridge, increasing to an aspirational frequencies of 20 minutes peak and 60 minutes at off-peak. This exceeds that. It meets the 20-minute peak frequency and goes to 30 minutes at the off-peak, which would be really great. This doesn't, again, preclude further enhancements and developments as time progresses. It needs to be considered and framed and looked at in a what is suitable for next year should we get NZTA co-funding, for example, and then how do we build on that going forward. In terms of our next steps, we are intending to apply for NZTA co-funding for this service through the Public Transport Service Improvements Bid, previously known as low cost, low risk. You may be familiar with that phrase. They have reworded it this year. What I do want to be clear, though, is that Waikato Regional Council has not yet provided direction to us staff as to what projects it supports for inclusion in our LTP. It is indicatively there for now, but our council needs to go through its own LTP processes as well. So that's the intention at this point. Should co-funding from NZTA be received, as we've alluded to, there's further conversations and refinements that do need to happen. Sometimes it is almost easier to wait until you have the funding decisions, because you can spend a lot of time and resources and money on getting into details that never eventuate into anything. So this is, just that main step. I will give a bit of context that in the last NLTP bid, and this is, I guess, just setting expectations. There is no draft GPS out at the moment. We don't know what the government will be looking to fund. Last NLTP for Waipa District, we applied for 4 new service trials, local services for both Cambridge and Te Awamutu, a Cambridge to Te Awamutu bus service, as well as option services to enhance the regional bus services and coverage, and we received funding for none of those. That's under the current GPS. So I do want to manage expectations, I guess, but our intention is there, and the more technical work that we do, this is the best work that puts our best foot forward for a funding application. So we'll hopefully put our best foot forward. Yeah. That's all.
Thanks, Catherine. So I think we can now open to the floor. Thank you.
Thanks. I'll start with Mayor Mike, Claire, and then Pip.
Thank you for that. Thank you through the chair. I've been looking forward to this presentation. Look, I think, Catherine, you sort of hit on something there right at the end of your presentation. And it's really about reality of what one wants to what one might get across the line in terms of co-funding with NZTA. And I think that's something I'm really aware of. I mean, I do sit in the RTC there. And it's sort of a reality check when you want something, but there's only so much money and there seems to be less and less of it. So with, I think it's the option C, and I read through the data and I think it rated as had 31 points against it. There was another one at 29. option, I think it was E, I think it was, which I actually quite liked as well, that mixed model concept, but bang for buck and building towards. To your point, Luke, hey, it's not perfect. None of these are perfect, but working towards and building towards. It seems like a logical step to me. My couple of questions are this. In terms of infrastructure for charging, I thought I read somewhere that hey, it would be sort of optimal to have some charging unit on the northern side, but you could get away with going back to Leamington. Did I read that somewhere?
I can provide comment. That was mentioned as us looking at it from a desktop assessment. We would need to just talk to the operators. It's not that far to the Leamington depot that we could probably not need that. And again, it could be a scalable thing that if you reach a certain frequency and we're there for a while, well then potentially to prevent dead running all the way to the depot. But the mileage that we get on the EV buses are pretty good at the moment. They don't have to charge between every run, for example. So it is something that probably could be worked around with the existing depot.
And look, though it's not on there and there would be an additional cost, but look, I understand the red line. I understand all the suburbs, understand which is sort of not on there, but it was another map of it coming back down Victoria Road and then linking back into town, was my understanding, to link up with it. Is that correct? There was, yeah, that one there, the orange line is sort of just going straight lining down Victoria Road. But alongside Victoria Road is Victoria Street. And I'm just looking at the width of that, all the streets in between there. And it is quite a big walk for an increasingly elderly population, whether we like it or not. And if there was a stop down Victoria Street, so it ducked into Victoria Street, then ducked on and continued with the flow, just something to be, it would be one more stop, which I know is slower, but there's really, apart from probably a few metres, there's not additional mileage.
So, through the chair, so Mike, do you mean somewhere by Princess Street or William Street?
Well, no, because that orange line's coming down Victoria Street, I'm assuming. Down Victoria Road.
Correct.
So to the left of Victoria Road, coming towards town, is Victoria Street.
Yeah.
So it's already a wide street that's very quiet.
Yeah.
At the moment, there's, as you know, there's temporary cycle things in there. But it's quite a quiet street. There's no more distance. I guess there'd be another 30, 40, 50 metres or something, but nothing of significance. But it would allow all the people living from the middle to the left, if we're looking, from the middle to the left, to walk towards Victoria Street rather than go towards the sort of darker line. Okay, it's just a practical thing of less walking.
Thanks, Mike. Claire.
Yeah, thanks. Well, just on this though, I thought that the link along Victoria Street wasn't preferred, so it was probably unlikely to be taken on board. But it looks like, Eric, you're making notes, so yeah, oh, great. So I wanted to explore the route, the Route 20 that goes through town, because my understanding of it is it comes along to the White Church and then goes down to past the town hall, and then it takes Alpha Street and then links to Duke Street down, to the lower level. Because I remember reading one of the reports that said that going back, it's going to be difficult with that gradient, going up Duke Street. Now, is that still, it's completely doable? Like you're not discounting that route or anything like that?
So 2 points. Just to go back slightly on the Victoria Street. So the orange is an alternative that we considered, but isn't recommended as part of the final option. So the red route is the kind of new northern branch. And then through the town centre, we were proposing to retain the existing route. So Duke, Anzac, Alpha. There's no issues that I'm aware of with the operation of that at the moment, which is not to say that you couldn't potentially consider changing the route in the town centre in the future if there were new destinations that you wanted to serve. But most of the existing patronage comes from the stops near the town hall, which is the kind of key destination that we need to get to. Well,
I mean, that's something that I think we're going to hopefully talk about later, because there are other locations in the CBD that then aren't serviced or not, people can't just get off a stop right next either like to the library or a medical centre or even the swimming pool. And it seems to me that the route as it stands is really just encouraging people really to get to Hamilton. Yeah. And in fact, that's what I'd be worried about too with the school assist service as well, which would just go through Carter's Flat and wouldn't go through the CBD at all. But it's good that we're actually having this opportunity to discuss these finer points. Yeah, because I would be hoping that the public transport system that we're going to be setting up for Cambridge is actually going to make sense to encourage more people to actually get to destinations within the town itself, so that they don't have to rely so much on their cars. Yeah, but you've been really helpful with just clarifying those points. Thanks.
Thanks, Claire. Pip.
Please excuse my ignorance in terms of where costs might sit between the Regional Council and the Waipa District Council. That $750,000 number that you put up and the $1.5 million worth of capital costs, does that directly impact, that 750K, is that paid by Waipa District Council, or is there some subvention from the Waikato Regional Council? And, I suppose the big question is, therefore, how does it start impacting on our rates decision?
I can talk to this. Noting I'm not a ratings expert, so excuse me if I explain it in basic terms more for myself than anybody else. So public transport is funded two ways. Infrastructure is funded by the road controlling authority, in this case Waipa District Council. The operations of public transport is funded through three parts. NZTA co-funding, 51% of the service. The remaining 49% is funded by ourselves, Waikato Regional Council, but from the overall operating cost of the service, private share revenue, whether that be from fare box revenue from the sale of tickets or from advertising on our buses, for example, reduce the overall cost that we then have to pay. So essentially, Waikato Regional Council rate for our 49% essentially of the operating costs of the service. How our rates are set up, there was a ratings change that was implemented in July 2025, I believe it was, because at the time, Waipa District Council were rating for public transport operations, but we were rating elsewhere. And so to get uniformity across the region, we took over ratings for operation costs everywhere in the region. It landed on a model where everywhere in the region, there's 5 categories. There's Hamilton Central public transport rates. There's Central Waikato serviced, Central Waikato unserviced, regional serviced, and regional unserviced. Cambridge, Te Awamutu, Morrinsville, all those locations all fall within Central Waikato serviced, as they have public transport services. How costs are then split between the 5 differentials is that we look at costs at a network-wide level, and then costs are proportionately distributed between the 5 zones and where services operate. And so in simple terms, for example, if we were to do a service enhancement here, or whether you were to do an on-demand, that's specific to Cambridge, that doesn't necessarily translate to direct rate increases for Cambridge users. That cost is split at a network-wide level and distributed proportionately across the category that.
But on a net basis, will we either pay it through Waipa District Council rates or potentially increased allocation of the transport element on the Waikato Regional Council rating requirement?
I think in principle, but I think that there are a lot of nuances behind that, sitting behind the operating costs for a network level, because increases somewhere could also be decreases in operating costs elsewhere. Our rates I mean, the overall costs, I think, are influenced a lot by annual plan decisions. Fare increases then compensate for increased costs. Operating costs also change, so it's quite variable.
So one way or another, if we take up the service, we will probably pay for it one way or another, not necessarily the full element, but a sort of a portion of it will come to our either local rates or regional council rates.
Proportionally across the 5 different rating categories, zones.
I've got Dean, Roger, and then I'll come back to you, Claire.
Thanks very much. This makes quite a lot of sense, but because we were warned about expectations, and which is obviously costs, I had in mind that there might be a way of having a hybrid model that leads to this as the demand and the uptake warrants it. I agree with Mayor Mike. Well, I think I agree. I think he was getting to the point with the red and the orange line. It seems to me that because I understand all the buses have to come from Leamington to start with, is that correct? That's all right. Everyone heard that. So the buses come from Leamington, right? Is that where they charge? Is that where they start on a day?
Correct, yeah,
right.
Natos Edgerton Drive.
So if they're coming from Leamington anyway, it makes sense to me that the red and the orange line could just be a loop on the same service, because they've got to drive to the terminus, which is in the middle of both of those roads. So why aren't we doing a loop of the service? And it doesn't matter which direction. People will get there eventually, and we can capitalise on more people on both sides of the town. So my idea for the hybrid model is, while it's new and we're not sure what the uptake is, instead of spending all the money on the infrastructure of the bus stops and things, we could utilise the in-road bus stops on the less busy streets, such as they do in Hamilton. Now, it's a bloody nuisance when you're the one behind the bus, but in general, it's a quick stop. They're on and off, and you should be letting the buses out anyway. So it's one way of teaching us to respect the buses when we're driving our cars. So I think that would have some merit, and I think that's a way of bringing the costs down. And also wondered, in the non-peak times, do we utilise the northern route as a local route initially, where it brings everyone to then one bus that does the Hamilton run? So it doesn't, if it doesn't warrant running 2 buses to Hamilton and back just to then service 2 parts of Cambridge when they arrive. If it gets to the point where they're so utilised that it's worth it, well, then we extend it. So that makes sense as well. And another point, which is not specific to this, but I presume, or I understand, when we run our busy services in the morning, some of those buses aren't required in Hamilton, and they come home back to base. So I see them where they come back to charge. Is that correct? Before they can carry on for the rest of the day, sit in Hamilton all day waiting to be used. I make that point because the other day I stood in the rain and watched 2 buses drive past me back to Te Awamutu, both of them out of service, before I caught the one that was scheduled in the Halpo. And I was thinking, it'd be nice if one of those buses picked me up, because they're going back to Te Awamutu anyway to recharge. I know one of them was, because it was the double decker that does the school run in the morning. And I would have quite liked to have got a ride. Thanks.
I could just provide comment on your last, and then I'll hand over to Luke. They are the buses that operate the Cambridge and Te Awamutu bus services don't serve any other bus routes other than those 2 services. How the operator may manage their fleet in terms of if there's depot priority, or if a charging thing has flagged up, they may jump between depots between Leamington and Te Awamutu. For the most part, they don't, and they intended to charge at their location, but I am aware that they do sometimes, go to the other depot location, and so why not offer a seater service? I don't think it's a reliable timetable necessarily, and yeah, we are aware of that.
But
yes.
you can flag them if you're on the route, right?
Well, they're out of service, so no, they won't. You can try it, they wouldn't stop.
No, they don't. I can tell you.
Thanks, Catherine. I'll touch on the other points there. Two were about the service itself, and then one about the bus stops. So in terms of the service and why it doesn't kind of loop back down, the kind of indicative timetable that we put together shows that when the bus from Hamilton gets to the northern end of the northern branch, it's about 50 to 55 minutes into the run. And so to operate a kind of hourly timetable with a kind of buffer and the rest break for the driver, that's almost the kind of maximum that bus can run. So if you were to extend it back down into the town centre, you'd need kind of more time in the timetable, and it wouldn't be able to operate as efficiently. So turning back around up there kind of makes more sense in that regard. In terms of why not running the branch locally during the interpeak, interpeak service frequency is one thing that does drive peak service use. So if you think about, considering, should I take the bus or drive to Hamilton? One of the factors that you'll think about is, well, how frequently does that bus run home if I need to get home in the middle of the day for an emergency or whatever it is? And so for that reason, we would recommend running the service at that higher frequency as opposed to a lower frequency during the middle of the day in order to encourage people to use it kind of throughout the day. The existing service has utilization in the middle of the day of around 25%, which is actually pretty good for an interpeak service. In terms of some of the other councils we work with, for example, Auckland Transport considers 25% utilization the point at which they would increase interpeak frequency, kind of for that previous reason. We also did think about, well, what if you ran each branch 2 hourly to give that kind of 1 hourly frequency that exists today between Hamilton and Cambridge, but then you're reducing service for Leamington, which I think is not the outcome that you want. And then in terms of the bus stops, so what we were thinking was kind of what could you establish within the existing curb to curb without having to cut in for indents and things like that. But that was just a kind of high level estimate. So it may be that as more work is done on exact stop locations that you can reduce that cost down, but that's kind of a next step.
So just to add to that, so that cost in an image for 1.5 million, that's full accessible standards. And that's kind of where we need to be heading to. So that's prams, wheelchairs, broken ankle, that it means we have full accessible services. Yeah.
You've got kneel down buses, right?
Yeah.
So they can still stop on the road with a pad on the footpath without having to build a whole lot of new infrastructure, can they not?
Yeah. The bus curbs are higher than the standard curbs, and they're heavier duty, so they don't get knocked around by the front tyres. So yeah, so that's it's probably not a policy, but that's a very strong aspiration to go to full accessible standards. Yeah, yeah.
Thanks, Eric. Right, I've got Roger, Claire, Shane, and then Ian online.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge the support of the staff, Regional Council, in particular in providing all the data that they did on the last 6 months of the existing service. It's really good. And I think the performance of public transport, Cambridge, has undoubtedly been a good success. It has. And it indicates that there is hopefully a change in culture, that we're getting that change away from using private vehicle to getting on a local bus, which is great. However, one of the things I'd like to investigate is actually our Cambridge Connections program. And I'm not too sure if you've had access to that, but within that, there is a long list of suggested improvements to our local service. And public transport, there are 5 mentioned long list outcomes. One is improved school bus service. The second is improved ticketing and timetabling information, so more of the electronic at the bus stops. Make bus use more accessible and efficient, which has happened with electric buses and with increased frequency on the existing route. Provide a local bus service, provide a dedicated local bus service that covers a wider area of Cambridge, smaller buses often suggested as more efficient, and then provide intertown, provide a bus service between Cambridge and TA. Now, nowhere in that strategic approach to Cambridge connections is there any mention of increase of the service to Hamilton. It's very much focused on having a local bus service. And if you look at the figures that we've provided with in the last 6 months, particularly focusing on the Monday to Friday, the growth has really been over a couple of the services. The early morning AM service going to Hamilton for work and for education, and then the similar couple of services coming back from Hamilton in the afternoon. And I perhaps, from the analysis that I've done, it paints a little bit different picture to what you're suggesting, that 50% of the services of both directions actually suggest an occupancy much less than 25%. So there's a lot of capacity to increase the service between the two centres in the existing service. And really, perhaps the demand is going to come on that work service. Perhaps you'd like to just comment on those 2 aspects to start with.
Certainly, yep. So in terms of Cambridge connections, yes, we did have access to some of the feedback that was received as part of the consultation. On that, I think there are a few things I would say. One being that if there's a service that's already existing and running well, kind of like Route 20, often people will kind of take that for granted that it's going to continue and that improvements will continue to be made. And so it doesn't surprise me that people would be commenting on the kind of other things that aren't there now, like a local service. Also, one of the things that we often see in public consultation, and I'm kind of speaking with my previous head of not being a consultant but working for Auckland Transport on, is that people will often tell you that they want a certain service, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they will use it. And so in putting this recommendation together, we were thinking about the kind of existing state of play and the levers that Waikato Regional Council has within their control, which kind of leads us towards this recommendation. One of the kind of key drivers of local service use is things like parking availability, the cost of parking. And so with the current state of parking, which is pretty widely available in the town centre and free of charge, while people might say, oh yes, it would be good if there was a local bus service, while the alternative of driving and parking is quite easy, I don't think that too many people would be going to use that service themselves, as opposed to saying, oh, it'd be great if someone else was using that. And so I think the last thing that you want to do at this point is to run a local bus service entirely within the town and have it not be well used. That would kind of send the wrong message, which is partly why we're recommending this change to the regional service, which does provide additional local connectivity for people that might want to use it and may not have the option to drive, but to kind of enhances the existing service and builds towards a time where you might have a bit more population and a bit more likelihood of people using local services. And then in terms of the kind of frequency to Hamilton, as I was kind of saying, it may be that not every interpeak service is particularly well used, but you kind of do need to provide that interpeak frequency in order to continue to encourage the peak frequency to grow. And what we're recommending here is kind of a service over 10 years. And so I expect that within 10 years' time, there would be kind of more interpeak patronage. And it may be that in the immediate term, you don't need all of that frequency, but it will help to kind of build that culture of use as more people move into Cambridge and see that that option is there for them.
Can I answer another question?
Yes, I do have quite a long speaking list, so probably just one more, Roger, and then I'll carry on.
Okay,
Thank you.
yeah. And it's the mention that you make that you believe that the existing service actually serves the town centre. I mean, you've mentioned that, and practically it actually doesn't. That the two stops that are on the existing service are at New World and at the town hall. And both of those, if you were to look at some of the public demand services for the town centre, they're in fact over a kilometre away from, say, the library or the town pool or even parts of the retail centre. So the suggestion, and that could well be why we've got such a low take-up of the intra-Cambridge service. It's only, what, 10% of the total usage. That suggests to me that it's actually not meeting the needs of the population to actually go into the town centre. What's your idea on that? I mean, you've obviously thought that the service serves the town centre. Practically, it doesn't.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think it's an interesting one. In terms of the existing stop usage, we do see the kind of town hall stop being much more used than the stop close to New World. And we didn't quite get to the bottom of exactly why. One of the things I expect is that because there's a lot of parking that's unrestricted, that some people park near the town centre to catch the bus to Hamilton, which is not necessarily a bad thing. And that's something for yourselves as the road controlling authority to think about. Is that what you want to encourage? We did look at, particularly when we were considering a local bus service, kind of which roads within the town centre could be used by services, what destinations might they want to go to. So because we landed on this kind of regional branch service, we've recommended to continue following the route of the existing regional service. But if you wanted that route through the town centre to serve other destinations, I think there's, it's worth looking at. The kind of walking catchment of those existing stops gives reasonable coverage, but that's not to say that you couldn't improve on it. I think my recommendation would be that whatever route you want the town centre to have should be used by both branches, and that if there is merit in changing that route within the town centre, then that's something that the regional council would need to look at.
I certainly agree with you that both should serve the town centre. Can I ask, and this is just a final question, but is the decision of regional council already made before they've had the feedback from the elected members of Waipa?
So we've support the recommendation of this report, but as with all our technical reports, and as I've mentioned, there's still a lot of refinement and nuances and conversations that we continue to have at a staff level day to day. So it's things like routing via the town centre, open to relooking at that, and we would continue to do that. This comes up all the time. There could be infrastructure issues of where we may or may not be able to put bus stops, which might, require a further refinement. So, we have those conversations all the time to get down to the details. Yeah.
I would have thought that there would have been some consultation with elected members before you produced that preferred option paper.
Thank you. Noted, Roger. I'll move to Claire. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair Joe. I wanted to pick up on, I think, Catherine, you mentioned the split in funding that you said that the road controlling authority is responsible for the capital side of things. Yeah. And that, Scott, it's been great to have your comments on a lot of this stuff. I've learned heaps from what you've said. And the impression I've been getting is that you are open to adjusting things and trying to make things work a bit more. You know, it's not like that technical report is set in stone, which is great. I wanted to explore whether or not it is worth staff looking at possible savings in the CapEx program, but that could still deliver the increase in services, because I don't know the relationship between NZTA looking at the CapEx side of a proposal compared to the OpEx. Like, do they like it to be balanced and to see that if you've got X numbers of OpEx dollars, you're matching that with CapEx investment, or whether or not we should be trying to perhaps deliver the infrastructure that's needed for the project, but maybe reducing the CapEx side of it. The question popped into my mind when you were talking about the red route, where I presumed you might have needed to put extra infrastructure at the end of it, whereas an option might have been they could actually just come back to Leamington and the infrastructure's already there. Stuff like that. Is that going to make a difference to the way NZTA looks at the proposal or not?
Thanks, Kate. Through the chair. So the capital cost is the bus stops, and that's Waipara District Council. And we're preparing a funding bid with NZTA for that. I guess in anticipation, subject to our LTP process. So if we get 51% support, that drops in half. And then and it goes back to my earlier discussion from Councillor Taylor's point about just accessible standards for our bus stops. So I think it's very challenging to not invest fully in that level of So basically, so the base standard of a bus stop is the bus curb, it's a footpath and a pole with information on it. That's the basic thing. But you need them in pairs, you need inbound and outbound, and then you need a safe crossing point in between the two. And that can be really challenging. The best example in Cambridge is on Cambridge Road by Kelly Road, where we've got the crossing point and the two bus stops. And it's a significant effort and money to achieve that standard. But once you've got that standard achieved, you've got the full, infrastructure in place. Yeah.
So I'd interpret that to say that you wouldn't recommend us trying to find savings in the CapEx envelope at the moment, that you think it's important to keep it as it is.
So what I would say, so there could be savings found. So where that red line terminates, it's in that C1 growth cell, and there's structure planning going on there. So there could be a partnership with a developer to provide infrastructure, and then the other way you could do it is reduce the amount of bus stops, but then you're reducing the coverage somewhat.
Thanks, Claire. I've got Shane and then Ian, and then after that, I'm going to hold questions because I want to make sure we have time for Brian for the last 15 minutes, and then we can come back to questions. Shane.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll try to be brief.
Okay.
I was really excited about the concept of parking fees change behaviour and will force more people onto buses, basically. And of course, that helps with affordability because you've got more volume going through. So I think it's something we should seriously consider because we know we have parking issues in Te Awamutu and Cambridge. And if we can have a double win by collecting fees for parking in the town, which means that we don't have cars parking there all day, stopping shoppers coming, and it also pushes people onto public transport, then surely that's something we have to look at. And I don't know if you've got any numbers in terms of what those fees need to be to change those behaviours, but I think that's something that we need to consider very seriously. The second point I'd like to make is, and it's a supplementary question to what Pip was asking, is about the payment of this through rates. So we've got general rates Waipa, but we've also got targeted rates Cambridge. And I think it's going to be an interesting discussion with my colleagues about how we should structure that. And I would certainly be pushing for a targeted rate for Cambridge people, given that they have that service. So that's my very quick questions.
Thanks, Shane. Ian, come to you now for the last question.
Just finding my own mute button, sorry about that. Two quick questions. I don't know if they're quick answers, sorry. I know this is a workshop, so we're not being asked for decisions as such, but looking at the time frame for both our LTP and the wider regional LTP, what's the decision point around this in terms of the options? Like, when is that decision actually coming? If it's not now. And then the $1.5 million of CapEx, I think there's already circa $1.5 million worth of CapEx in the LTP. Is that the same 1.5 or a different 1.5?
So, thanks, Ian. So that last question about the capital, yeah, I understand there's already some money in the previous LTP for this.
Yeah.
Sorry, through the chair. Just with regards to the approval of the service, I guess, from a regional council perspective, due to particularly the timings right now, the time of year with the LTPs and the NLTP budget at the end of the year, the intention would not be to reopen this project for work. There are a number of things that we've noted, to consider through the next phases of work, such as city centre routing and, infrastructure and things like that, which we're aware of. And like I mentioned, we will pick that up as our BAU day-to-day work and continue to have those conversations between ourselves. But this is to get the ball rolling. We're happy with the recommendations and we'll be proceeding on this basis with our bid to NZTA.
Thanks, Catherine, and thanks, Luke, as well, and Eric. You guys are welcome to stay there while we welcome Brian up, if that's appropriate, or whatever you'd like to do. It might be still a group effort or not. All good. Thank you very much. Really appreciate your time with us this morning. Thank you. Hi, Brian. Welcome. Nice to see you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So there's a bit, obviously, more information in the memo that's attached, and I guess, certainly acknowledging those issues around the table around, when does council hear and input into these things? And I guess forgive us as staff if we have misstepped and not done that particularly well in the past. We're trying to catch up now and bring all the right information to the table for people, but also acknowledge that this is a program of work that's been going on for several years. The regional, the Metro Spatial Plan has talked about a transformation of transport, and we've held workshops around this table on improving passenger transport, and certainly councillors have told us in the past and made representations at the Regional Transport Committee seeking improved transport options for Cambridge. And that has all been the genesis of this work to prepare options and get it to a point where the Regional Council and NZTA and this council can fund things, hopefully, in the future to make it successful, make it work for Cambridge. So the bigger picture then in that memorandum is around this, the process that we do every 3 years. We have timeframes by August to put up our maintenance and operations program. a draft, which we, because of the LTP timelines, we put in a draft based on what's in our current LTP. And then as council moves through its LTP planning process and considerations, it gets refined. So then in December, we're able to, sort of almost lock in that maintenance and operations program for transport. And then obviously the draft improvement programs, whether that's new bus stops or new bus services, happen over that time period to October, December, and then in March next year, those improvement projects have to be locked in, and then they go to, obviously within that timeframe, we've got our LTP consultation period, and we have a consultation period for the regional prioritised plan of improvements, and all of that comes together in a final regional land transport plan, goes into a national land transport program, and then NZTA decides where that government funding is going to be allocated in about August next year. So in September next year, we'll have answers about what has been approved. So quite a major process, but we'll see on page 4 of the memo, there's a table in pink, and that just sets out what's in our current LTP. So that top line was a placeholder really for things that might come out of Cambridge Connections. And obviously over the next few months, that will get more refined to a point at the end of this year in December when council makes decisions. We'll have a suite of improvement projects which will go forward for NZTA funding. We've got a wrap up there of district walking and cycling, which is that urban mobility, and whether that's in Wrongia or Timaru or Kiki or Cambridge or Ahaupo, those are projects rolled up in there, and there's a business case for that. Excuse me. Then that's supporting the PT infrastructure for Cambridge, that 1.5, nearly 1.6 million. It's in the current LTP. You get through the LTP deliberations. This time round, you get to decide, what money you want to spend there and over what time frame. And we do our very best to align with what regional council can fund and what NZTA can fund. With the airport precinct multimodal connectivity, that's about as the airport industrial area expands, trying to make sure that there are walking and cycling links between the parts of the airport, but importantly for the bus that goes by on State Highway 3, there's opportunity for employees to get off a bus and get into employment zones around the airport. So that's that business case. Then we have the Timaru strategic roading network, which is that business case that was done a few years ago about saying, well, if you're not, council's unable to build a western bypass to get trucks out of the centre of town, what are the shorter term improvements that you could make in and around the town that would really improve transport in Te Awamutu? And then there's a district-wide passenger transport infrastructure there, which is for bus stops everywhere else outside of Cambridge. And also on that page, you'll see in the middle of the page, there's a bullet point list, other things that other councils in the Future Proof group are doing around, this implementing this bigger metro spatial plan. Park and ride, should we have it in the region? Where would it make sense? State highway improvements, the highway improvement program will come out and be put forward to be prioritised as well. We haven't seen that yet, but it's coming soon. Hamilton City are looking at if there's a city to airport bus route, where would it work best in terms of, because that's certainly something that people have been asking for some time. So the vast majority of passengers who would be heading to and from the airport would be coming to and from Hamilton City, so they're kind of spearheading that work. And then there is this safety issue that we're seeing more and more with the Timaru bus service, which is having to stop on State Highway 3. And I've certainly, and a number of you may have been on the bus where the bus driver jams on his brakes and tries to pull up in a safe place to pick up a passenger who's failing a ride. but also cognizant of the traffic that's speeding along at 100 kilometres an hour and in passing lanes on State Highway 3 and making a safe stop to pick up or drop off a passenger. So that's something that's a concern at the moment, but over time will only get worse because of the increasing volumes of traffic on the highway, but also the increasing number of passengers who want to use that bus service. So those are all things that, are in the mix in terms of, potential improvements or things that need to be looked towards in the future. But around the council table, staff will be taking guidance and direction from councillors about what those priorities are for the coming LTP for us to put into a transport program to go to the regional council to seek NZTA funding long term. So happy to answer any questions that you've got on those points.
Thanks, Brian. Steph, I'll start with you and then I'll go Claire.
Thanks, Brian. It's really nice to see you. And I hope your little grandson is healing well.
Yes, the cast is off. Thank you.
Oh, that's good news. I'm not sure whether this is a Game of Thrones or a game of snakes and ladders, but if I was in the councillor's shoes and this is my first term around, I'd be thinking, can I just get a piece of clarification from you? And we're very fortunate to have your background and experience, Brian. So we go through our efforts and we think about which things we want to pursue and invest in. We put them through our own LTP process. We have to decide on that before June next year. So we need to agree our LTP, but we have no real certainty about any of that until it's gone through the regional council and their long-term plan process as well, and then the NZTA process, and not till the August after following that June. So we do our best, make our best efforts, but we have no certainty of our funding partners' decisions until later. Can I just clarify that?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. So that's the Land Transport Management Act says this is the process you have to follow. Each council determines its priorities. They put them together into a regional plan where there's a prioritisation process for those improvements in a regional plan, and the Regional Transport Committee and staff there, put a priority number beside each of those projects. They've got a big responsibility. But of course, that gets wrapped up into a national land transport program where all of those priorities are looked at again in terms of the buckets of money that the government has for subsidy. And they then NZTA decide, taking direction from the minister, how much they want to spend on highways, local roads, improvements, passenger transport, walking and cycling, how much money there is, and how they see that priority list as to what they will fund. So quite a process.
Thanks, Brian. So we just have to know what's in our next year's plan for 27-28, but make the decisions that we need to make for this next LTP with best endeavours next year when we finally get to those decisions, and know that then we would review it there each year thereafter in line with what decisions we get.
Yes.
Thanks, Brian.
That's
helpful.
Thanks, Brian. Claire, and then I'll leave that as the last question because that will bring us to time.
Thanks, Brian. I really appreciated you giving those bullet points of what other work's being considered by other partners in that. Because I wanted to talk about the airport bus services, because I had anecdotal evidence that people are being dropped off on State Highway 3 and then walking to the terminal, to catch a plane. And so it's obviously happening. Are you aware of it? And I'm hoping it's going to be given the needed priority either by us or Hamilton City, to ensure that there's a safe way provided for people to get off and then, walk along that road to the terminal.
Through you, Madam Chair, that's quite right. We have heard that anecdote. And I guess if you are arriving in this country from another country and you're in a major city and you see that there's a bus that goes past the airport, you probably expect to get to the airport. But that's not the case in the Waikato. So that's a reason why, ideally there needs to be an improved service or much better education about what services are available in terms of taxis or shuttle vans and things like that.
Thanks, Claire. Okay, that brings us to the end. Thank you, Brian. That was really informative. Appreciate that. And that ends our public transport workshop. It's been great to have that.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, really appreciate it. Nice to meet you both. Thanks, Luke. Thanks, Catherine. Right, we'll break for lunch now and we will come back at 1:05. Thank you. Welcome back, everyone, to our workshop and briefings day. We are going to kick off with our LTP level of service welcome and recap. We've got Councillor Kamzin back online. I'll hand to Katie for a bit of an intro, and then we'll head into our publicly excluded part of this section. Thanks, Katie.
Yeah, fortunately for you, you'll only hear from me a little bit today and tomorrow. So, but just to sort of tune us into the purpose of today's session and tomorrow's session, we have, Zoe will be able to just share the timetable in just a moment. But the purpose of today is to be able to circle back to you about the levels of service based on the direction that you've provided to us in the previous workshops. And because when we went through that exercise, and you'll see the information when we present it back, obviously you identified some areas where you wanted us to investigate lowering and increasing potential level of service. We end up in a pretty neutral position about where that takes us financially. And so what we thought, and that doesn't surprise us at all, this is a difficult process, but what we thought would be useful is to therefore pause before we go into the level of service conversation and just step back in the public excluded session to be able to understand what's the total financial picture, so that it gives you a bit of a steer about, well, what comes next in the process and where might you want to investigate further. So what we will do, and that's, I guess, why we've got these sort of 2 days together, we'll run through this financial picture, we'll run through the level of service work, and tomorrow then we run through and some of the financial policies as well. Towards the end of tomorrow, we'll talk about what and seek feedback from you about what that early engagement might look like with the community, and seek direction from you about where would you like us to be doing further work as staff. Based on what you've heard over the sort of those couple of sessions. And the reason for doing that is obviously that there is different kind of bang for buck for the amount of effort that we put into different areas. And so we really want to be able to make sure that we focus staff effort in the most useful way for you to be able to bring it back to subsequent workshops. So,
and welcome also to Neil and Matt. I'm sorry I didn't mention you folks in my intro. Nice to see you.
That's right. So here's what we'd like to achieve today around the level of service, and then also understanding the financial situation, which is what Matt and Neil will speak to today. George will run through the level of service work today. And so all I wanted to do was just, again, tune us in, and so we are deliberately using this sort of same information at the beginning of each of these sort of workshops, because you've just spent time thinking about a whole load of other things and you walk back into the long-term plan. So I guess one of the things that is very, very small on this slide, but wanted to give you real assurance that as staff, we're really basing all of the work that we're doing on the direction that you've already given us. And so that is the goals and priorities that you've set for this triennium, the growth principles that you've already adopted, and the financial parameters that you provided a couple of months ago. All of that work's framing the way that we're thinking about the way that we approach the long-term plan, and what sort of how we might need to be able to provide those choices for you, keeping these things in mind. And again, just tuning us in about where we're at now. In the slide pack, what you'll see is that we are still in this discovery process here of actually reviewing different options before we start actually developing those budget proposals and considering where we're at. We are looking for early community engagement in October, and then we track through after that time. So we have a series of, if we think of this kind of diagram, I think the colour coding is useful, still in that sort of discovery phase, and getting direction from you about where you want us to keep looking and bringing that information for you to consider. And that takes us into the next slide, which is what you've seen before, to remind us about what's coming next, about these different components that you'll still look at through workshops through that September time. before we get into those budget iterations and that early community engagement and pull it together. So still, one of the things that we'll see by the, like I say, by the end of tomorrow is to consider what is that workload that's coming between now and October, so that we can make sure that when we come to you to seek direction about each of these areas, we've actually done the work to support you having the right discussions and providing that guidance. So we'll have a good wrap-up session at the end of tomorrow as a result. So perhaps now we can move into a public excluded session so that we can then move into